She wasn't beautiful in the way the world demanded, she was beautiful in the way a storm leaves a field changed. The first time Aaron saw her, she was arguing with a parking meter, her voice low but sharp, and her eyes burning with the kind of fatigue that doesn't come from lack of sleep but from years of trying too hard to be okay. He sat on the bench across the street, pretending to study, but the wind carried her muttered curses right to him, and he found himself smiling before he even saw her face. Her coat was too nice for this part of town, expensive leather scuffed at the sleeves, her heels digging into cracked pavement as if she didn't realize or didn't care what kind of place she was in. He didn't know why she was here, just blocks away from the university's edge, near the diner where students nursed black coffee and seasoned diplomas, but she looked like someone who used to live in the world and got tired of pretending to enjoy it. Aaron was 22, fresh-faced in that particular way that only those who've never been properly wrecked by life can be. He had a good jawline and better manners, the kind of guy who always helped his professors carry books to their cars, who read poetry out loud to his roommates until they threw socks at his head. But inside, he carried this dull, unfinished ache, the kind of ache that made him seek out older novels, older music, older souls. He saw her and knew instantly, she was imperfect, alive, and something about her existence made the present moment feel like it had claws. He didn't talk to her that day. Just watched her finally feed the meter a crumpled dollar, mutter "screw you" under her breath, and walk into the bookstore next to the cafe. He stayed on the bench, textbook open but eyes fixed on the door she'd disappeared behind, and for some stupid reason he didn't understand yet, he returned the next day. And the day after. For a week straight. On the 8th day, he walked into that same bookstore with no plan, just hope, and there she was, flipping through a hardback copy of Franny and Zoe, her fingers tracing the edge of the page like she was memorizing it. He picked up a copy of something nearby, The Bell Jar, maybe, or Lolita, he never remembered, and stood 2 shelves away, pretending to be absorbed. She didn't notice him at first. But then she sneezed, quiet and elegant, and he said, "Bless you," without looking up. She chuckled an exhausted, almost sardonic sound and replied, "You're the first person to say that to me in weeks." He turned then, saw her eyes up close. They weren't soft. They were steel blue and tired, but they were honest, and something in him leaned forward just slightly. "I've seen you before," he said, before he could stop himself. "You were arguing with the meter out front." She rolled her eyes, but not at him. "That thing stole $3 before it gave me green. It's lucky I didn't rip it out of the ground." He smiled. "Well, it made my week. I was starting to think the city was full of robots." "You're not from here," she said, tilting her head. "Too much sunlight behind the eyes." He gave a small laugh. "University. English major. That obvious?" "Painfully," she said, closing the book with a snap. "You still think literature will save you?" "I think literature is the only thing that understands me," he said, then regretted how young that sounded. But she didn't scoff. She just looked at him differently now, not like a stranger but like a variable in an equation she hadn't solved yet. "How old are you?" she asked. 22. That did it. She set the book down like it had burned her. Too young. For what? For whatever this conversation might become. He swallowed his reply, let the silence hang for a beat too long. Then he said, "You keep coming back to this bookstore. That meter keeps ripping you off. Why?" She looked away, lips parting like she was about to say something sharp. Then her expression softened, almost imperceptibly. "Habit," she said. "And memory. My late husband used to own this place. Before it was bought out." Aaron didn't know what to say to that. He wasn't ready for death in the conversation, not this early. But the weight in her voice made something in him settle. "I'm sorry," he said, meaning it. She gave him a look like she didn't want his pity, but she also didn't tell him to leave. They talked for 20 more minutes that day, mostly about books. She corrected his pronunciation of Camus. He quoted Rilke and she rolled her eyes. They argued about whether Mrs. Dalloway was a masterpiece or an overrated diary entry. And when he asked for her name, she hesitated only a second before saying, "Claire." "Claire," he repeated, trying it on his tongue. "I like it." "You don't even know me," she said. I'm working on that. That was the beginning. What followed were chance run-ins that weren't chance at all, her reading at the cafe when he happened to walk in, him asking for recommendations he didn't need just to keep the conversation alive. It wasn't flirting, not really. It was a slow circling, two people orbiting something neither of them had named. Then came the rainy afternoon, 2 weeks after that first real talk, when he found her sitting on the same bench he had once watched her from. Her eyes were red, her phone in her lap, screen shattered. He sat beside her, close but not touching. Bad call? Bad day, she said, her voice quieter than he'd ever heard it. And bad years, if we're being honest. They sat in the rain like that for minutes, saying nothing. And then, gently, Aaron reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a paper crane he folded them during lectures when he got bored, and held it out to her. She stared at it like it was a live animal. I don't have an umbrella, he said. But it's waterproof. Sort of. Claire took it. Turned it over in her palm. And then, for the first time since he'd met her, she smiled. Not the tired smirk she gave strangers, not the reflexive courtesy smile, but a real one. It cracked her face open like sunlight through blinds, and in that moment, Aaron understood something deep and dangerous. He wanted to be the reason she smiled like that again. She tucked the crane into her purse. Thank you, she said, almost a whisper. And when she stood up to leave, she touched his shoulder, not long, not lingering, but enough. Enough for him to know this was no longer a game. It was the beginning of a secret. And secrets, he would learn, are living things. It didn't take long for them to figure out the code. Claire would sit in the farthest corner of the bookstore cafe, the one with the broken lamp that nobody ever fixed, and Aaron would show up 30 minutes later with 2 coffees, hers black, no sugar, his with milk and cinnamon, and they would talk like strangers who happened to share an opinion about the book she was pretending to read. At first, that was enough. It was quiet, contained, easy to tuck behind the rest of their lives. He could return to campus with ink stains on his sleeves and a head full of quotes she'd thrown at him like darts. She could walk back to her apartment in the Heights, where everything was beige and cold and paid for in full, her purse still carrying the folded paper crane he'd given her as if it were some kind of anchor. But things never stay simple when time starts stretching. After a month, the conversations were no longer hypothetical. She told him about the first time she caught her husband lying, how she stayed anyway, how shame works slowly, like erosion. He told her about the girl who broke his heart sophomore year, how she cheated with his roommate, how he pretended he didn't care for 2 entire semesters. Claire asked if he ever got even, and Aaron said no, he just got quiet. Claire didn't laugh, but her eyes softened. That night, they left the cafe together for the first time. Not holding hands, not touching, just walking close enough to feel the heat from each other's arms. They walked past the bookstore, past the parking meter, up to where the streets start to widen and the houses get taller, and she stopped 3 blocks from her building, looked at him for a long moment, then said, I don't bring people into my space. I didn't ask to come in, he said, and she nodded. But you were waiting for me to invite you. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. She reached into her purse, pulled out the same paper crane, and handed it back to him. He looked at it, confused. I made this for you. I'm not throwing it away. Just passing it back for a minute. He opened his mouth to ask what that meant, but she was already walking away, and he didn't follow. The next day, she texted him for the first time. After that, everything accelerated. They started meeting at odd hours, mornings before his classes, evenings after her meetings. Claire worked in design consulting, something corporate and abstract, but she hated it and only talked about it when she needed to vent. Aaron listened, mostly, because he didn't know what advice to offer someone who had already lived through so many endings. She would occasionally stop mid-sentence and ask if she was boring him, and he would shake his head, say no, say she was the only honest voice in a world full of pretend problems. Sometimes she would smile at that. Sometimes she would look away like it hurt to hear. They both kept the secret tightly sealed, but the world has a way of sniffing out the things people try to hide. It started with whispers on campus. A classmate of his, Maya, asked one afternoon if he was seeing someone. She said it casually, over a group project meeting, but her eyes held something sharper. He shrugged, said he was too busy. She said she saw him by the bookstore a lot. Then added that some older woman was always there too. Said she looked like someone who didn't belong. He laughed it off, but his stomach twisted the rest of the day. Later that week, he found a note taped to his dorm door. It wasn't signed. It wasn't kind. It used the word mommy in a sentence that made his ears burn. He crumpled it, threw it out, and told no one. Claire didn't need to know about that. She already had enough distance between her and everyone else in the world. She didn't need to be reminded of the gap. But she noticed something had shifted. One night, sitting in the back of his beat-up car parked 3 streets away from her apartment, she asked him what was wrong. He told her everything was fine. She said he was a bad liar. He said she was a better one. I don't lie to you, she said quietly, but there was something defensive in her tone, like she was tired of being doubted by everyone, like she wasn't sure she believed her own words either. Then don't start, he replied, and they sat in silence for a long time, the windows fogging up from the tension more than the cold. That night, when they kissed for the first time, it didn't feel like crossing a line. It felt like admitting something they'd both known for weeks. Her hands were cold, his were shaking, but when they finally pulled apart, she didn't apologize and neither did he. The next morning, Aaron's phone rang at 6:13 a.m. unknown number. He let it go to voicemail, but the message that came through drained the color from his face. It was a man's voice. Calm, deliberate, and full of malice. You think no one's watching. You think this doesn't matter. But it does. And soon enough, you'll see how much. He didn't recognize the voice, but it wasn't a prank. There was something final in the tone. Something that made his chest tighten. He called Claire immediately. She didn't answer. He texted. Waited. 5 minutes. 10. 20. Finally, she replied. We need to be more careful. He stared at the words, then at the street outside his window. Nothing looked different. But everything suddenly felt heavier. He didn't delete the voicemail. He played it again. And again. Claire didn't ask to hear the voicemail. She didn't ask who might have sent it, whether he had enemies or jealous friends or some ghost of a situation he hadn't told her about. She only asked him to meet her later than usual, past midnight, after she was done with whatever she did in the hours she didn't talk about. They met in the back lot behind an old office building near the river, a place that felt too quiet for the city, too open to feel safe. He brought coffee again. She brought nothing but herself and a look that made it clear she had already made decisions without him. They sat in his car, engine off, lights off, their faces dimly lit by the green glow of the dashboard clock, and for a long stretch neither of them spoke. She broke the silence with a voice flatter than usual. If we stop seeing each other, it doesn't go away. Someone already knows. He stared at her profile, studied the line of her jaw, the faint signs of tiredness that no amount of rest could erase. I'm not going to disappear because someone doesn't like what we have. Claire blinked once, slowly, as if weighing the risk of saying what she was about to say. I've seen how this plays out. I've lived in a world where whispers are louder than actions. It doesn't matter if we don't care what they think. People who don't get to feel what we feel will always want to ruin it. Let them try, he said, sharper than he meant to. She looked at him then, really looked at him, with something like admiration and something like fear. You say that like you're ready to lose things. He didn't say he already had. That being with her wasn't a rebellion against the world but against the slow, gray dullness of a life everyone else accepted. Instead, he leaned in and said, we don't owe anyone an explanation. They kissed again, this time longer, less careful. There was no hesitation in her this time, no guarded tension. Her hand was on his neck, his on her waist, and for a second they both forgot about whoever might have been watching. Then a pair of headlights turned into the lot, passing them slowly. The car didn't stop. The driver didn't look in. But Claire pulled away immediately, her breathing tight, her eyes scanning the shadows. He said her name, once, but she just shook her head. I shouldn't be doing this, she whispered. Aaron didn't try to convince her otherwise. He just waited, gave her space to decide. She looked at him again, then said, "I'm not scared of what people say. I'm scared of how easily I forget to care." She didn't leave right away, but when she did, she didn't say goodbye. He sat in the car for another half hour, listening to the voicemail again, his phone screen glowing against the dark, the voice of someone he couldn't identify repeating the same warning with the same calm menace. The next week, they didn't meet in public at all. Claire told him she needed space, that her name had come up in a conversation at work where someone asked if she had family in town. She didn't. But the way they asked made her skin crawl. Aaron kept his head down at school, skipped a few classes, told his friends he was sick, and ignored Maya when she asked if everything was okay. He didn't trust her smile. It was the kind that hid too much. Then came the night they couldn't stay apart. It was a Friday, late, and Claire texted him at 1:07 a.m. with one word, "Now." No explanation. No address. He didn't need one. He knew exactly where she'd be. They met in her car this time, parked on the edge of a construction site near a bridge nobody used. She had wine in a thermos and a playlist of old songs that sounded nothing like anything from his generation. She handed him the thermos without a word. He drank and didn't ask how much she'd already had. "Talk to me," she said finally, her voice quieter than the music. He did. He talked about his childhood, his mom's long hours, his dad's absence, his frustration with professors who assigned busy work instead of substance. She asked questions when he paused, never breaking eye contact. He asked about her first real job, her old house in Portland, the friend she used to have who left after Claire refused to play along with a lie. She told him about the day she realized she was never going to be young again. He said that was the same day he decided he didn't care how old anyone was, as long as they made him feel something real. Claire laughed at that, not in a mocking way, but with something raw underneath. "You're going to make a mess of someone's life someday," she said. "Probably mine." Aaron didn't deny it. "Is it a mess if we chose it?" She looked out the window, then said, "Someone saw us last week. At the café." He went still. "Who?" "I don't know. But I got a message too. Not a voicemail. A letter. No name. Just a typed sheet in my mailbox. It said I should remember who I am." He gritted his teeth. "And what did you do with it?" "I burned it." They sat in silence again, not out of fear, but because there was too much inside the silence now. Too many decisions already made. Too many more waiting. Eventually, she turned off the music. "We should stop meeting in cars like fugitives." Aaron looked at her carefully. "You want to stop?" She shook her head. "I want to stop hiding." That should have made him feel brave. Instead, it made his stomach twist. When he got back to campus, he found a new note, this time under his door, folded neatly. It had no threats. No accusations. Just one line. "She has more to lose than you do." He didn't sleep that night. He didn't tell her. And in the morning, he found out someone else had started asking questions, someone close. The person who started asking questions was Aaron's older brother, Derek, who had recently taken a teaching fellowship on campus and wasn't supposed to be around long enough to notice anything. He had always been the more conventional one, older by 6 years, studied law, wore suits even on weekends, carried himself like he already had a reputation to protect. Aaron hadn't told him anything, not even when Derek offered to let him crash at his apartment off campus if dorm life ever got too loud. They didn't share that kind of bond. Derek had always treated him more like a younger recruit than a sibling, measuring him with disapproval masked as concern. So when Derek showed up unannounced at the back of one of Aaron's classes, then caught him outside the library with that raised eyebrow and quiet voice, Aaron knew something had shifted. "You've been distant," Derek said, arms folded like a prosecutor laying foundation. "People notice. You're not exactly subtle." Aaron kept walking, hoping to outpace the conversation, but Derek followed. "Tell me the truth. Are you seeing someone?" Aaron didn't answer. Not immediately. He stared ahead, counted his steps, calculated the risk. "Why does it matter?" Because someone I know said they saw you with a woman who's definitely not a student. Downtown. Café. Bookstore. Holding hands. Aaron stopped walking. Is that illegal now? It's not illegal, Derek said, voice low. But it's stupid. She's not your age. She's not even in your life stage. What the hell are you thinking? I'm thinking for myself. You should try it. You think this is a fight? It's not. I'm trying to keep you from walking into something you're not prepared to deal with. She's not going to give up her life for you. I didn't ask her to. Then what do you think this is? A phase? Some kind of rebellion? It's real. Derek exhaled through his nose, looked away for a second, then back. You have no idea what happens when this kind of thing goes public. She's not a secret to me, Aaron said, too loudly. She's about to be a headline if you keep walking around like no one sees you. Aaron turned without saying another word and walked away. He didn't tell Claire about the conversation. Not because he didn't trust her, but because he didn't want to see the look on her face when she realized the circle was closing. He didn't want her to think he was weak enough to be scared. Claire had other things to worry about. Her company was hosting a regional design conference, and she had been roped into giving a keynote presentation on brand strategy and consumer ethics. She told Aaron about it in a text, said it was going to be terrible, asked if he'd be there even though she never invited him to things like that. He said yes before she could second-guess the offer. The conference was held at a luxury hotel downtown, filled with people who all looked the same, polished, humorless, confident for no good reason. Aaron slipped in unnoticed, dressed in black, hands shoved in his pockets, head down like he belonged there. Claire took the stage exactly at 4:15 p.m., wearing a dark green dress and a calm expression that Aaron had never seen on her before. He sat in the back row, watched her move across the stage like it didn't matter that everyone was staring at her. She spoke clearly, controlled, no wasted words, and the whole time, he couldn't believe this was the same person who had cried in his car 3 nights ago because she thought she might lose everything. Halfway through the presentation, Aaron noticed someone else watching her, a man in a navy blazer, late 30s, seated near the front, not taking notes, not looking at the screen. Just staring at Claire with too much interest. Aaron leaned forward, tried to get a better angle, but the lights made it hard to read the man's face. At the end of her talk, Claire thanked the audience and stepped down to polite applause. People crowded her. Aaron waited. 15 minutes later, she found him near the lobby entrance. You came, she said, a little surprised. You were good, he said, serious. Claire hesitated, glanced around, then leaned in closer. Let's get out of here. But before they could move, someone called her name from across the room. It was the man in the blazer. Claire froze. Her posture changed. That's my ex's business partner. Aaron didn't speak. He knows who I am. And now he knows who you are. The man walked toward them slowly, a glass of wine in hand, wearing the kind of smile that wasn't friendly. He stopped a few feet away, looked at Aaron, then back at Claire. Didn't think you'd be back in circulation so soon, the man said. New hire? Claire didn't flinch. You should keep walking. He ignored her. You're braver than I thought. Aaron took a step forward. You done? The man laughed quietly. I didn't say anything. But you might want to leave before someone else does. He walked off, leaving the threat in the air like a stain. Claire didn't look at Aaron. She didn't need to. They both knew what had just happened. On the way out, she gripped his hand tighter than usual. We have to stop pretending we can keep this invisible. Aaron said nothing. They walked through the lobby together, eyes following them from all directions. At the door, she let go of his hand. Outside, he asked, do you regret it? She didn't answer right away. Then finally, not yet. They stood on the curb as taxis passed by, too loud to hear each other breathe. She turned to him, opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. In the silence that followed, Aaron knew something had shifted. They were no longer hiding from strangers. They were being watched by people who mattered. They didn't speak for 4 days. Not because they were angry, but because the silence between them had a shape neither one wanted to press against. Claire didn't call, didn't text, didn't even send one of her short, dry messages that said nothing but let him know she was still there. Aaron waited. He didn't chase. He went to class, sat through lectures without hearing them, walked across campus with his phone in his hand, checked it even when it hadn't buzzed, and read the last text she sent him over and over until the words lost meaning. He had no plan, no one to talk to, and nowhere he could say any of it out loud. His roommate asked if he was sick. His professor asked if he was falling behind. Derek didn't ask anything, he just looked at him like he already knew. When Claire finally called, her voice was tight, stripped of anything soft. "We need to talk," she said. He agreed. She gave him an address. It wasn't the bookstore or the cafe or any of their usual places. It was a public library on the west side, near where nobody knew either of them, quiet, with long rows of bookshelves and wide tables between tall windows. She was already there when he arrived, seated at a corner table with her coat folded neatly beside her and her phone face down. She didn't get up when he sat down. "I can't keep pretending this is only about us," she said without looking at him. "It stopped being just us the second people started watching. I never cared about them." "I know," she said. "But I do. Not because I'm weak. Because I have too much to lose." Aaron didn't interrupt. He let her finish. "My job is already walking a line. I had to talk to HR yesterday. They asked about the conference. They asked if I brought someone with me. They didn't say your name, but they don't have to. And I don't have a clean record. I've already been written up once for inappropriate boundaries. Years ago. It wasn't even real, but it's on file. Another strike and I'm out." "So that's it?" he asked. "We're finished because they don't like it?" Claire exhaled and finally looked at him. "It's not about liking. It's about what happens next. If this continues, it doesn't stay quiet. They'll go after me harder than you. You can walk away and it becomes a college story. I walk away and I'm done. I never asked you to risk anything." "You didn't have to," she said. "But I did." Aaron leaned back in his chair, jaw tight. "I don't want to disappear." "I don't want to erase you either," she said. "But you're 22. This doesn't get to break your life open the way it would mine." He didn't want to argue. He wanted to tell her that the worst part wasn't the judgment or the rumors or even the way people had started pulling away from him. The worst part was how alone he felt when she wasn't there, and how little else made sense without her voice in the middle of it. Then Claire said something she hadn't said before. "I love you. But that's not enough." It hit harder than he expected. Not because it was the first time she said it, but because she didn't say it like a beginning. She said it like a door closing. Aaron nodded once, slowly. "Then say it in public." Her eyes narrowed. "What?" "You said it to me. Now say it to them. Don't make this harder." "I'm not. I just want the truth to exist outside this table." Claire looked around, as if someone might be listening, but the library was nearly empty. Still, her voice dropped. "You want to be seen with me like it's some kind of statement? I want to stop hiding like we're wrong." She hesitated. "Then there's only one way." She stood up, picked up her coat, and walked out. He followed, unsure if she meant they were walking into something or walking away from it. They took a bus to the center of campus. She didn't speak. Neither did he. When they arrived, the student union was holding a reception event for a visiting speaker. Aaron had ignored the email invitation, but the room was full of professors, faculty, alumni, and students in blazers pretending to care about anything other than appearances. Claire walked in first. She didn't hold his hand. She didn't even look at him. But she didn't turn around. Aaron followed her in, watching heads turn one by one. The man near the coffee station raised an eyebrow. A woman in a red blouse nudged someone next to her. Derek was standing by the far wall, holding a glass of water, and his face froze when he saw them. Claire stopped near the center of the room. She looked around at all of them, then turned to Aaron. "You want the truth out here?" she asked. He didn't answer. She faced the room. "This is Aaron," she said. "I care about him. That's not up for discussion." No one spoke. Someone dropped a fork. Derek didn't move. Aaron stood beside her. "We didn't hurt anyone. We just stopped lying." Still, silence. Claire turned back to him. "You got what you wanted. You can leave now." He didn't move. Not for a few seconds. Then he said, "Do you want me to leave?" She didn't answer. He left. Outside, the wind cut through his coat. He sat on a bench near the quad and stared at the empty sidewalk. His phone buzzed. A message from Derek. This was always going to end like this. He deleted it without reading the rest. The next day, Claire's social media went dark. Her number didn't work. Her email bounced back. She was gone. Aaron didn't look for her. He knew better. She had already done what mattered. She gave him her name in front of a room that didn't deserve it. He stayed at school, finished the semester, took a job in the writing center. People stopped whispering eventually. They always do. But no one ever asked him what happened, and he never told them. One night, months later, he opened his desk drawer and found the paper crane she had given back to him, folded and creased, the wings slightly bent. He set it on the windowsill. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just sat there, wondering what she would have said if he had asked her to stay one more time. He never knew if she would have said yes. And that was the only question that still mattered.